Some time ago we had our first encounter with psytrance-inspired techno when remaking the bassline from one of the Charlie Sparks tracks. But there is also another artist whose kick and bass stuff reminds of psytrance. In this tutorial I will show you how to create a CLTX style techno beat with just Serum, a single kick sample and a handful of effects. The whole recreation project along with 80 other ones can be downloaded by signing up on my Patreon page. And if you want to get your hands on more hard or industrial techno sounds and Serum presets, you should check out my upcoming sample and preset pack. Inspired mainly by KRTM, Raxeller or Ayarkana, it will have everything you need to level up your hard techno productions. Sign up to my waiting list and get your discount at the day of the pack premiere, that is in the next week. As you might expect, the first and the most important sound we will make today is the psytrance-like bass. Stick to using just a single oscillator with a saw wave loaded. Make sure to create such a rhythm in the MIDI clip, as the very first thing we will do is to modulate the volume of the bass to simulate sidechain compression. We want to do that to make the bass more rhythmic, plus it will create a space for the kick drum that we will add soon. For that I can use an effect I'm sure I won't need. Turn down the mix knob and assign an LFO to its level control. The LFO rate matches what I drew earlier in the MIDI clip, so I just have to set the LFO mode to act like an envelope, so the modulation always starts from the beginning and doesn't loop itself. Set the LFO range and draw an LFO curve. A typical ramp curve may add some clicks at the end of each note, so I recommend to add an extra point to smooth out the modulation curve at the end. The second important modulation is the filter modulation. Psytrance basslines use low-pass filters, where the cutoff frequency knob is quickly modulated with an LFO. I will use the second LFO that will be similar to the first one. I can copy the LFO2 settings to LFO1 window by dragging the LFO2 tile to the LFO1 tile with left Alt key held. Let's attach the LFO1 to the cutoff frequency knob to see what we need to change. For the basics, I can set this modulation to be unidirectional to have an easier time setting the modulation range. Some clicks have appeared once again, so I will try to flip the LFO1 curve to make them disappear. The filter modulation of course has to be faster, and it should repeat itself. What's left is to fine-tune the filter settings. In the oscillator A window, by turning down the initial phase randomization to 0, I will make sure the bass will sound the same each time I play a note. Another thing to do in the oscillator window is to make the bass sound lighter by removing the fundamental frequency of the sound, also called the first harmonic. We definitely don't need that frequency in the bass sound because the low end will come from the kick drum we will add soon. Usually people use a high pass filter to do that, but Serum has a wavetable editor in which we can do the same job in a much easier way. On the top, we see the volume levels of each harmonic that builds the sawtooth waveform. Starting from the left, we have the first harmonic that gives the sound its fundamental frequency, and the further we go, the higher harmonics that add higher frequencies are presented. To make that bass lighter, turn down the first pillar that controls the first harmonic of the bass. That's everything we need to do in the OSC tab, so let's move now onto the effects, because here you have two very important things you need to add. What you also need to do is to check out my private lessons offer if you would like me to explain all the sound design or music production subjects in such an easy and practical way. See my website for more details, and remember, free consultation calls are available as well. At first we need to beef up the sound, and the best way to add more crunch and fatness is by using distortion. The bass after distortion is not only fatter but also louder than before. Compensating the difference in volume here is important because it allows you to judge better how does the distortion shape the sound. The second important effect is the multiband/OTT compression. This kind of compression splits the bass into the low end, mid frequencies area and high end. Both high and low frequencies become louder and more compressed than mid frequencies, and that sounds just like a recipe for a fat bass. To control the intensiveness of this behavior, both threshold and ratio knobs are used. What controls the compressor's rhythm, that is how fast does this aggressive behavior begin and for how long it lasts, is controlled by respectively attack and release knobs. In the end, you can also adjust the volume levels of low, mid and high frequencies individually by using these 3 sliders, but since I will filter out the bass heavily soon, these adjustments are not necessary. I will also mention the importance of these two effects order. With the current order, at first we are adding more frequency content with distortion to make the bass warmer, and later, through compression, we are squashing the bass sound, reducing its dynamics to bring all that crunch from distortion up front. If I move the compressor to be before the distortion, the compressor by squashing the dynamics will make the bass louder on average. The distortion comes after, and because of compression, it will perceive the bass as louder, thus the sound will be more distorted, even though the amount of distortion added is unchanged. This will result in a worse bass sound. The bass preset is done, so let's do that aggressive filtering I mentioned a few minutes ago. Using EQ8, I will use both low and high pass filters to remove unnecessary frequencies from the bass. This bass has a bit too much mud that usually sits in the frequency area between 200 and 300 Hz, so now I will use 2 extra bell filters to fix that issue. Our CLTX style beat to sound full needs to constantly fill the frequency area from around 90 to 200 Hz. That frequency area, similarly as the area from 200 to 300 Hz, gives the beat warmth and feeling of fullness. A modulated bass on its own, even with distortion and multiband compression applied, will not fill that frequency area enough. There is a need to create a second complementary bass sound. We will create that sound by duplicating the psytrance-like channel and modifying the Serum preset. I will also simplify the melody in the MIDI clip and make it play just a single sustained note. The first thing we will do is to remove both filter and volume modulation. I will turn off the flanger where the output volume knob is modulated, and I will flatten the curve of the LFO that controls the low pass filter. I want the complementary bass sound to be deeper, so I will pitch down the oscillator A by an octave. What is much more important though is that this bass has to sound smoother and wider. A single solution to get these both results is to use more unisono voices and detune them. With these three controls I will add more unison voices, create a pitch difference between them for modulated background, and adjust the volume levels of these extra unisono voices. Now, to ensure the bass sound will sound detuned right from the beginning, we have to turn on the phase randomization to 100%. We will make some changes in the effects section too. Since our support in bass doesn't need any crunch and high end, that's already provided by our main bass sound, I will remove the multiband compressor and turn down the amount of distortion added. Furthermore, to make the bass even smoother, I will add some reverb in the end, with the mix set to 100% so we get rid of the dry sound. Now I will adjust all the reverb settings. This reverbed bass sound will have the volume adjusted as well. And I will use the equalizer to once again remove some mud and to filter out unnecessary frequencies with low and high pass filters. This time I will make this bass take a slightly different frequency range than the first bass sound. On the frequency spectrum, both sounds will look like this. The frequency area where both sounds overlap has to be arranged very carefully. Take some time to adjust low and high pass filters in both sounds. The last sound we will synthesize today is another psytrance-based layer that will give the sound the right texture in the higher frequencies area. I am duplicating the reverbed bass channel and modifying the MIDI clip for yet another time. I want to have here rhythmic clicks, which lengths can be controlled by the lengths of the notes in the MIDI clip. As of now, this doesn't seem to make sense, but wait until I start modifying the Serum preset. Because in Serum I don't want to use the oscillator A anymore, I will also temporarily turn off the reverb, and now I will work with the noise oscillator where I will create that clicky sound. Remember the MIDI clip with short notes inside? Now I can return to it and set the noise duration by controlling the lengths of the MIDI notes. I will play along to previous bass sounds. To shape the clicky sound itself, in the noise oscillator window I can pick a different noise sample and control its pitch. I can recommend experimenting with the attack_kick samples category. The rest of the changes will be done in the effects tab. Here I will add the hyper/dimension effect before the distortion, so we will only use the dimension part. This small effect is a pseudo stereo effect utilizing delay. Let's turn back the reverb and readjust it. I will use now the whole reverb type that sounds different from the plate one. This reverb comes with two new controls, spin and spin depth. They modulate the reverb itself, and we will use these knobs to make the reverb sound less metallic. In the end, I will add a high-pass filter inside of Serum to make the clicky sound lighter. We don't need here lower frequencies. To ensure the highest reverb quality, I can go to the Global tab to increase the processing quality. The clicky sound, despite being simple, will have to be equalized heavily to remove useless high-frequency hisses. I will start out with a simple low-pass filter, and later I will add more precise adjustments. In the end, I will make the sound a bit warmer by boosting some mid-frequencies too. The equalization is later followed by stereo width increase and volume adjustment. What's interesting here is that I'm using the third utility to automate the volume of the clicks in time. Similarly, as one could automate the volume of hi-hats to create more groove in the percussion, I am automating the volume of the clicks in time to make the bass line more rhythmic. The whole bass seems a bit dull. Some extra saturation would help making the bassline more alive. I will return to the first bass sound, and right after the equalizer I will add a saturation knob by Softube. A question arises, couldn't I just turn up a low-pass filter to make the bass more alive? Simply turning up a filter will indeed add more frequencies to the sound, but it will not give the same impression of a sound being fried up, which contributes to a warmer sound. Because distortion can sometimes add back some of the low end, I cut here with a high-pass filter, just to be sure I am adding another high-pass filter right after the saturation knob. Let's add now a kick drum to the beat. I am interested in a very clean and punchy sample like this one. Everything about this kick sample is great if we ignore the fact this kick is short. The issue is that I want to use this kick to fill the whole beat with the lowest frequencies. After all, we have been creating that space for the low end when using high-pass filters on the bass layers, right? So how to make the low end longer in this kick sample? I suggest using a resonant filter in the equalizer. Using EQ8, I am adding a bell filter with a large Q value. To pump up the bass, you would like mostly to set the frequency control to the fundamental frequency of your kick, although it's not mandatory. For example, this kick drum's fundamental frequency sits somewhere around 48 Hz, but I decided to boost the 43 Hz frequency because that's where the sub-bass sits in the reference track of CLTX. Now we have to play the kick, set large gain, and the kick gets longer. There might be a situation now that the low frequencies from the kick drum being played multiple times will overlap causing low-end issues, so I recommend exporting such a kick onto the new pad in the drum rack. And here is that exported kick drum with the playback mode set to gate, so we won't overlap the low end anymore. The next step is to saturate the kick drum to make it sound richer in the whole mix. The choice of a plugin is totally up to you. I found that the Radiator by Soundtoys suits the kick best. As in Serum, I want to compensate any difference in volume levels to make the comparison more fair. I will saturate the kick even more with the drum bass. Even despite setting the drive to 0, this effect will still beef up the kick a bit because of the medium saturation mode being chosen. I am also doing little, almost inaudible adjustments with the crunch, damp and transient controls. And I am using the boom section to emphasize another low frequency of the kick in the very same way as if I was using a resonant filter. At last I'm blending the effect with the dry wet control and compensating the difference in volume. After that, there comes an equalizer that serves three purposes. In the reference track by CLTX, there is a bright reverb applied to the kick. I will create a parallel processing chain, where the dry chain will contain the kick as it is right now, but the reverb chain will be different. On that chain I will use a rich soft-tube TSA-R 1R reverb with the dry wet set to 100%. The reverb alone has some unnecessary low and high frequencies, so there is a need to equalize it afterwards. If I want to change the pitch of that reverb, I can use a shifter after the EQ, and if I want to change the pitch of the reverb just slightly, the frequency shifter mode will be the best pick. At last, I adjust the stereo width and the volume of the reverb itself. We can finally group all the sounds we have created to process them together. The first thing would be to increase the stereo width of the whole beat to make it seem larger. After that, the beat is ready for multiband compression. To not make this video too long, I will just explain each compressor's settings and their purpose. Starting out with the low-end compressor, I set its release to short because I want to flatten the low end of the beat. This will give the impression of having more low end in the beat. To avoid eating out the low end punch coming from the kick drum transient, I set the attack to 55 milliseconds. The gain reduction is large to indeed make that low end present throughout the whole beat. The mid-frequencies compressor, due to the very short attack, will make the kick sound more snappy. The release is also kind of short, and its purpose is to glue the kick with the bass, which will contribute to a better rhythm. The amount of gain reduction is here large as well. high frequencies compressor is set up in a similar way as the mid frequencies one. We are eating just a bit of the kick drums attack in the high end, but in exchange we will bring lots of high frequencies up front by compression. This will make the beat more alive. And now the beat with and without the whole multiband compression. There is also some group equalization involved. Definitely we will remove almost inaudible frequencies somewhere below 35 Hz to clean up the mix. Apart from that, we will precisely remove some mud from the beat and sculpt the low end more. Our beat is quite wide, and if we isolate the side part of it to listen what is happening on its sides, we will hear some lower frequencies. To make the low end and the whole beat more solid, I will add another EQ8, this time working in a mid-side mode. On the side part of the equalizer, I will use just a high-pass filter.